Sean Holohan of Victoria Minivar.
Victoria, the question I'd like to ask you in a very respectful way is if the City Council were to vote down the Beauregard plan and the developers in Beauregard were to develop by right and not have any affordable housing units at that point, where would those people go who would then be pushed out of their homes?
They will stay here if the city does the right thing, but no and demand from the developers to sit down again and renegotiate that and demand and deny the permits that they're looking for.
Thank you. The next question is of Melissa Feld asking Allison Silberberg.
Okay.
And I'm in the middle.
Allison, as I've gone door to door and met with people all across the city, one of the things that's come up between they want to get engaged in city government and what's happening, but they feel very alienated. They come home from work, they either volunteer or they put their kids to bed. Or what would you do? What actions would you do to strengthen communication in the city?
To strengthen communication. Well, that's a great question, and Paul actually had mentioned this as well. Of course, I'm a huge believer, as someone who's a writer and a communicator, that this is critical, that people feel engaged and heard, your slogan, that people need to be heard, and I agree with that. And we have a city that full of bright, educated, highly professional, highly accomplished folks, and the city can benefit from their engagement. I serve on a commission, the Economic Opportunities Commission. I've been on it for 8 years. I'm now the chair for 2. And I love serving on it, and I love the members of it. And we make a difference. There are like 100 boards and commissions. That's one way to get engaged. But people need to let their elected leaders know how they feel about the issues that affect them and their families, so that the elected leaders can do a better job of serving their needs. I know that when I send an email, it seems to be responded to very quickly, and I to the city council or to the mayor, and I really appreciate that. So, but I think we need more transparency and more engagement. But it's fixable, and I'm hopeful. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. The next 15-second question, asked of a 60-second respondent, is of Tim Levain asking Arthur Peabody.
Arthur, what did you think about the city budget that was just approved? Would you have changed anything?
I would have recommended that the city council not cut the school board budget by $1.23 million, sure. I think the budget process has worked reasonably well over the years. I'm prepared to say that the city council has been supportive of our schools, and it's greatly appreciated. But in terms of budgeting, I think we need to be much more aggressive in implementing zero-based budgeting within the city. I think we need to start looking at what resources we have, how we can redirect them. And that would help us manage the tax rate in a more appropriate fashion. I mean, the schools have gone literally to a zero-based budgeting system where we review each position every year and rotate through departments. So we're not put in the position of just eliminating vacant positions, which the next year you find to be essential. And then you can focus your activities directly to your strategic plan, which can be very helpful. I would recommend that the city's strategic plan become more focused. Right now it sort of promises everything to everyone, and we can't do everything at once.
Thank you. The next question is to be asked by Allison Silberberg of Paul Smedberg.
Paul, hi. I've known you a long time. I wanted to ask you about what you feel because you've been on council for a while now, so this will be particular to you. How do you feel about public service, and how do you feel about what you've learned through these years? And if you could do anything differently, would you do anything differently and going forward in your future public, just in general? How do you feel about serving the people? And you've given a lot of yourself through the years.
Well, serving on council has been a very special opportunity and an honor, to represent, the city. And what I like most about it is interacting with folks to solve problems. And I think I obviously have a record of, of doing that. And I'm very proud of that record. I think, driving around the city and seeing things being implemented and programs being successful, is just extremely rewarding. I think we have so much that makes Alexandria special, whether it's its people, the neighborhoods, the promise we have. And really, that's a lot about what this election is about. And I think, we've heard a lot of different opinions here tonight about what the future of Alexandria is going to be. And, I think that's the one special thing, because you never know. I think, up here we can say what we want about the topics of the day, but in reality, people have to evaluate all of us on how we as future leaders are going to respond to the issues that we don't know about yet. And what kind of experience and professionalism do we bring to the table to address those issues?
Thank you. Next question is asked by Del Pepper of Justin Wilson.
Hello, Justin. Well, actually, the question that I had hoped to ask has been asked, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Last night we passed, or I should say on Monday, we passed our budget without raising the tax rate, which was really amazing. And I wondered, what would you have added and what would you have deleted from that budget?
That's a great question. Generally, and one of the approaches I took on my tenure on council is what I call a take-your-own-medicine approach. I don't believe we should take shortcuts when we pass our budget. One of the things I led our council in doing during my last budget was reducing our borrowing and putting more current year cash into our capital budget. So we're making things easier. Unfortunately, one of my complaints about the budget that was adopted by council last week is I think it did make the life easier for the next, or life harder for the next city council, because we used a lot of one-time money to balance that budget, and I think that's fiscally irresponsible. I think the city council needs to ensure that the budget we pass pays our bills today and not passes the buck to the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is Donna Fossum asking Boyd Walker.
Boyd, the essence of a city is uniting people and forming consensus. How would you do that?
Oh, well, thank you, Donna. I would do it the same way I did it on the waterfront, which is engaging citizens in the process. And I'll be meeting with a bunch of people tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. talking about the Beauregard plan. And so I will work with citizens. We have two other projects coming forward, Landmark and the Genon site, the power plant on our river, 25 acres, which we will definitely need to engage citizens so we can come to a better consensus and don't end up where we ended up on the waterfront or the Beauregard plan.
Thank you. The next question is of John Chapman asking Tim Levine.
Tim, as an educator, I know it's imperative that, and I think you know this as well, that children start school ready to learn. What are your plans to increase what we can do with pre-K and ensure that all of Alexandria's kids are able to start school ready to go?
I think it does need to be a budget priority to try to work down the backlog of kids who really want to get into Head Start and haven't been able to. And that's something the city's been trying to do, but it's hard going. But I also have a special place in my heart for the 0 to 3 age, because I think a lot of kids, when they're old enough to go to Head Start, are already so far behind because they have difficulties at home. And I've been involved on the board of Stop Child Abuse Now in Northern Virginia, that is one of the groups that's doing parenting classes to teach parents how to be parents. A lot of them were unprepared for that. But with stimulating kids at an early age and with good nutrition, then you can have kids ready to learn when they go to Head Start. So I think looking at early childhood development, not just Head Start, is the way to go.
Thank you. Now it's the turn of Paul Smedberg to ask Sammy Motionberg.
Hey, Sammy. Over the past 8 years, I've worked pretty hard with city staff and residents to get the Mirrant plant, or the Genon plant, to a point where things fell our way and this thing is going to be closing next year. What's your vision for that site?
Thanks for that question, and thanks for your hard work on that. I think that was a real triumph for the citizens in our community to tackle a public health problem, an environmental problem, and make a real difference. And I think that everybody involved deserves credit. I think my main concern about the uses for that space going forward is any environmental cleanup that we're going to have to do. How that's going to be paid for, how we're going to assess what residual pollutants might be in that site. I would love to think that one day it could be a new park, it could be a site for some mixed-use affordable housing maybe, that we could do something with it. But our first challenge is going to be assessing what the environmental situation is, what's in the ground there, and making sure that we can get it cleaned up. And that's going to be a costly thing, and it's going to be a challenge for us, and we're going to have to seek help from the corporations and from Superfund and other sources.
Thank you. Now it's Sammy's turn to ask a question of Donna Fossen.
Hi, Donna. We've heard a lot about education. I think you've spoken some about education as well. Given the city's the limit on what the city can do vis-a-vis education, what would you do on council to improve and encourage improvement in education?
Well, we have a contrast in this city. We have one of the most educated populations in the country. Over 60% of our citizens have four-year college degrees. 30% have professional degrees. And yet, most of us don't have school kids in the school system. Only 13% of us in households have children in our schools, whereas the average city has 33%. So I would get people like me who have way too many college degrees. I teach for other places. Why can't I teach for my own city? How can I get involved in our schools? And there's lots of people like me here. We want to contribute. We understand the phenomenal benefit of public education and the value of it. I think we need to pull two worlds together so that we can get everybody involved in educating our public school system occupants, I guess, students, whatever. The fact is we all need to get involved in the public education of Alexandria.
Thank you. Next question, Victoria Minivar asks Michael Hepburn.
Okay, Michael. Hey, Victoria. Good to see you again today. How do you will generate income or revenue to pay for housing for the working poor, which is housing for people that work full-time, such as janitors, mechanics, hotel housekeepers, and teacher assistants?
Very good question. It goes back to the development piece, I believe. We truly need to look at ways where maybe, well, actually, I would love to recommend that our developers contribute more money into the fund so we can use that money to provide more affordable housing. I also would like to have more conversations with property management firms and developers about different ways that maybe if we provide incentives related to rebates of taxes and tax abatements and different ways where we can help them maybe renovate a little bit with energy efficiency and things like that. Can they dedicate more units for us for workforce housing and affordable housing? I also would like to truly sit down and have a conversation with the people in our city about what are we willing to do to make sure that we are providing more housing stock in our city. I know we're trying to preserve units. I know we need to develop. I know we need to have a conversation about home ownership, but we also need to create an awareness in our city about the issue that we have with affordable housing and also homelessness. To be honest with you, my true passion for this is the same amount of time and energy that we put in for campaigning with yard signs and things like that. I want us to use that same energy as far as educating people about the affordable housing issue that we have in our city and having a true conversation about can we provide dedicated funding yearly to make sure that we're trying to achieve this goal and meet this challenge. So, good question.
Thank you. The next question is from Arthur Peabody to Sean Holohan.
Sean, what would you do to bring greater transparency to the development planning process? And more specifically, how would you address citizen concern